to go. Oh, so, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Blessing and Cursing. This one's back on schedule. I know last week me and Joe kind of sat down and went all over the place with it, but we're back with our fresh stream of guests today. Today we are joined by Brother Todd, a friend of Philip's. Well, I don't know how many friends Philip has, but someone that knows Philip at least. So we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little about yourself? What brought you here today?
Just Phil had been asking me to come guest on your podcast, and I tried to do it a month ago, or a little bit over a month ago, and things just didn't work out. So
Yeah.
I told them in a second it should work out, and
Yeah.
luckily they have.
Good deal. We're pretty used to that for the most part. We try and be as flexible as possible, and we've always got somebody waiting in the wings to throw that together. So Philip doesn't just ask anybody to be on here. There's been several people that we've known mutually, and for whatever reason, the Spirit didn't lead, but the Spirit led him to ask you here for whatever reason. So that must mean you've got something about you must speak to him that must be worth talking about. If that makes sense.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, don't know what exactly, but
What's your background in the church?
I was raised in the Baptist church. I had a father that I could probably count on both hands how many times he was in church. But I had a mother that had us there every weekend. Every Sunday, every Wednesday night. And I thought I was saved at 10 years old, but up until 2013, that's when I realized I truly wasn't saved. Mm-hmm. I was actually on a 4-month deployment when I accepted Christ. And then, shortly after that, we started working on our marriage. There were things going on and
Sure.
difficulties, but we started working on that, and we were actually empty nesters. And it just so happened, I remember one story. Our neighbor, their daughter came over, and she just had a baby. So,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife knew, I always wanted another kid. We had 3. But I just remember being emotional seeing their little one, and our neighbors were asking us, what the deal was. But, I told them we always want another one. Then within a year and a half, here we get a call. This was a Monday, to be exact. My wife got a call at 2:00, and her mother had called her, and a distant relative of my wife. She was a stepdaughter of my wife's cousin, and that's how we fell under the family thing.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't want to lose a child due to her drug use to the state. And so she got a call at 2:00, and she didn't even reach out to me first. She just told her mom and said, yeah, we'll take the child.
Yeah.
And she knew how I felt. I told her, I said, you didn't have to call and ask me. You knew my decision or my answer. But
Yes.
So between 2:00 and 7 p.m., here we are with a 5-day-old baby. We got home, we met the caseworker, did a background check, and went through all that. They did a home visit, and by 7 p.m. we're leaving St. Mary's with a 5-day-old.
Wow.
Making a mad rush through Walmart to get everything. All we left the hospital with was formula and a pack and play.
So how far was this after your conversion?
This is 2002, almost 2 years.
Yeah.
That was December of 13, and then this is October of 15.
I can tell you that speaks pretty powerfully to the validity of the conversion, because I know a lot of people, if you didn't have that love and the desire of Christ in your heart, your wife comes home and says, hey, we've got another kid now. That'd be kind of
yeah, true.
Yeah.
I think the Lord knew what He's doing, putting this child in our life, and
Sure.
I guess it gave us the structure, and I don't know. I guess He knew we needed it, because, like I said, we're trying to find things to do with our time.
Yeah.
At the time, we had a 19-year-old baby,
Yeah.
And to give a little background, right now we'll be married 26 years in May, and we have a 30-year-old son, a 27-year-old son, and a 25. So it's how we met. We both had a child out of wedlock, and I ended up adopting her son, and then we have the daughter together, who's 25. She'll be 26 in May.
Awesome.
So, but like I said, at the time we didn't know what to do with our time. We're trying to,
Yeah.
Then so we went ahead with the adoption, because the mother had the right to visit with the child through parent place, but after a couple visits, she had to make the payments for the time with the social worker.
Yeah.
And it was disheartening because you had to show up to this place and you had to drop child off. We couldn't stay. I mean, we sat out in the parking lot. We never left the grounds. But it's just disheartening to know that you have to leave your child. And then after 3 or 4 visits, I think a total of 6 visits, she showed up for 2, I think. And it's just, it's money that she had to pay that was taken away from, I guess, whatever, her drugs or whatever she was on. Because we had found out shortly after we took Leia and we took, I can't remember the name of the custody we took. Because, I told him, I said, I did not want visits monthly. I said, I don't want the money. It's not what we're doing this for. We want to give this child a chance. And so we pursued with the adoption, and by August of 16, we fully adopted the child. Awesome. Because the mother wasn't around. Like I said, she didn't take advantage of her visits, and she never showed up for the court. I think she showed up for 1 court date hearing.
Has she tried since to be involved, or is it just kind of...
Not really, no. And we'll get more into that, but it's disheartening to go. I've never been in a juvenile court before until we went through this adoption. It's very disheartening seeing how many grandparents are raising grandkids.
Yeah.
So we finalized that, and we knew that shortly after we took custody of Leia that she was pregnant again. So here, 10 months later, she's having another child. And this was within 3 weeks of Leia's adoption, and we heard that she had a little boy on a Thursday, so we went over there to UT on a Saturday just to visit. We took her a gift and a blanket for the boy, and mainly just to get pictures for Leia. Just so, we didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
She was kind of upset with us because she'd heard we had pursued the adoption and all this, but so we did that, took pictures, and we begged her to, we know you're upset with us, but we're doing this for the right reason, and we begged her, don't send this child away to the state, And my wife had actually talked to one of her cousins, and we had actually gotten her a bed at a facility for women's, for drug rehab, and we had her bed reserved, and we begged her, let him come with us. You try to get your life straight, and then, we'll go through the courts of you getting your custody back or however, So from the time, that was Saturday, so Tuesday, we get the call from the hospital if we want the child, and we went and picked him back up. So here, we're getting him at 5 days old, starting all over 10 months later.
Yeah.
And I was kind of hesitant because I didn't know how she was going to do, if she was going to, I told my wife, at first I didn't want to hold him that much because, when we got the girl, I told her that night, I said, this child's not ever leaving this house.
Yeah.
And she'll, even my wife would confess to that. And I told her, I said, I don't want to get too close to the son if we can't keep it.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. I commend these people that do foster homes and stuff, but I don't think I could do it because I'd hate to think of the day that you have to give them up, whether they're going back to their natural parents or going through adoption or what. But, so we get him, and I kind of kept my distance at first, but I don't think the mother ever saw him after we took custody. But when she left the hospital, she went and stayed at my mother-in-law's for about 2.5 weeks, and leading up to when that bed was going to open up, and I think she left her home. She disappeared once or twice, but she came back, and then when it come time to that morning for my wife's cousin to take her to the rehab facility, she refused to go, and which my mother-in-law kind of pushed her out of the house. If she wasn't going to try, then we haven't seen her since. And then we went ahead and pursued with the adoption of the boy. And it took a little longer because we waited, we didn't.
Yeah.
And we actually do still keep in contact with the father. I think he was more of a drug dealer than
distributor rather than a user.
But I think he still uses. But I mean, we do keep in touch, and we told him. And at the time, he was in prison for drugs and selling drugs, but we do keep in touch. And he has bought him gifts, and we will meet him out for to eat. And he's been by the house, and both kids are biracial, and you know that question's coming. You know, we can't hide the fact that
Sure.
we're not mom and dad biologically, but you know, I kind of dread the day, but you just got to let your love for them show that
So
they know we're mom and dad, and no matter what.
I can tell you a funny story similar to that. I had a very good friend named Steve that I used to work with, and he was bald, pale, like if you thought of like a picture of a white guy, this was him. And he adopted 2 boys from southern Georgia that were very dark-skinned, full black babies. And, you know, he adopted them outright. He and his wife raised them, everything like that. And they got to a point in high school, and I said, Steve, did they ever ask you if they were adopted? And he said, no. They just kind of looked and assumed. You know, they never said anything. But he said that it was the wildest thing growing up, that people in the area would be very critical and almost abusively negative about him with these 2 boys running around.
Oh, yeah.
So I pray that doesn't happen to you, but hopefully as they get older, there's not a heartbreaking moment of, you know, how did this come to be? I think those 2 boys, from what I gather, the story was actually pretty humorous whenever they finally came out and said it, but I just thought that was very funny.
Yeah, it reminded me of Savannah when she figured out that I wasn't her biological dad. She was talking to her sister in the bedroom, and I heard her sister say, and I was like, what? And I started listening, and she's like, well, how come that all of us have different last names? And she said, is your first name and your last name the same? Like they give you your last name and your first name? And I'm like, hold on, let me help you with this conversation, because her sister was grounded, and she's like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
You know, like you're talking you hate to see the negativity side of it, but you know, my wife's experience being out grocery shopping or whatever with 2 biracial kids, and people look at her funny, and they just, you know, and we've had that conversation. You know, you just got to let it go.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you want to say something to them, but you just you know
There's
where your heart
always
is,
gonna
and you
be
know.
ignorant people out there.
Oh yeah, there's none of that.
That's I guess the polite way to say it is it's just ignorance in its purest form. I had a teacher in high school who had adopted a little girl from I want to say China, but I may be mistaken on that. And this was back in the late 80s. And she said the biggest complaint she got was people said, how are you going to understand a kid when it grows up and speaking Chinese?
That's wild.
So it sounds like you got two real blessings out of this.
Oh yeah, they're truly. I think they're more blessings to us than we are to them.
Oh sure, well
that's the way we feel.
I don't
You know.
believe in one-way blessings. If you're giving, you're receiving just as much, if not more so.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And I am glad to hear that you are still in contact with at least the father in the situation. Whether or not he's living the life he should be, he's seeing a life.
Yeah.
He's able to see that opportunity and see some positivity out of that.
And it was kind of emotional when we were pursuing the adoption of the girl. You know, within the first 10 months of her life, you know, the mother had showed up to one court hearing, so we knew where she was at and how to get in touch with her. But we couldn't find him. But then we had heard that he had actually got arrested on a DUI in Sevier County. So we actually went to the Sevier County Jail to talk to him and, you know, try to get him to sign over rights to the daughter. And he didn't want to talk to us at first, so we kind of we actually stopped and we left our names and asked if we can talk to him. And we'd actually left and went to the Smokies baseball game. It's like a Wednesday, so they play a noon game. And we came back and he kind of refused to talk to us at first, but we asked the court or the cop there if we can just at least talk to him. And he came out and talked, and he was very emotional. He started crying, but he said, you know, he agreed to sign papers. He goes, as hard as it is for me to do this, he goes, I know I'm doing the right thing, you know. And that, you know, that's when we told him, you know, if you get your life straight and we know you're clean, you're more than welcome to come around for birthdays and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Christmas. I mean, like I said, you know, we knew from the beginning, you know, like I said, they're going to know we're not the biological parents once they get up enough.
Yeah.
You know, we've even had the girl come home from preschool and stuff, you know, saying that I'm black and you're white. And, you know, luckily during the summer I'm holding my arm up and saying, oh, we both close in color, but, you know, it's just.
If there's one thing that I've come to know is in my opinion at least, and I think everybody has a different on this, biological parents do not matter half as much as a true mother and father.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a step situation, adoption, whatever it is, it's the heart of the matter. And I've known in my own family and extended family, friends, what have you, there are some awful biological parents and some amazing foster step adoptive parents.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't like step kid. I don't like half brother, half sister. I don't like that idea.
No.
That's your child. Now, you weren't involved in the making, but you are hands on in the raising, and that's what a parent is.
Yeah.
Fully in that. So that's really encouraging for me to hear the steps you're taking forward. And I really love the idea of you having full grown kids out of the house and you just having the baby fever, so to speak, from a neighbor's kid, and then God saying, "Here you go. Here's twice what you expected."
Yeah, no. I mean, we still had two living at home at the time, but, well, actually, I think the daughter was renting an apartment, but we still had the oldest son.
Yeah.
He's the one we couldn't get out of the house. But finally, at 30 years old, he finally moved out. But no, and it's really been a blessing for them too, because they love these two kids to death.
Is it harder having a 30-year-old to raise in the house or having babies to raise in the house?
Nah, I think the 30-year-old was more work. That's what we used to tease them about. But no, it's the only thing is, I think they saw how much children were, how much work, and
Oh yeah.
I'm afraid we've deterred them from wanting any grandkids or giving us any grandkids anytime soon.
They always say the best birth control is to help somebody else's kid.
Yes.
True. Yeah. But it's and we're kind of the same situation. My son spent a lot of time with, he's up at my house every other weekend, every other Wednesday. Then growing up, and our older son, I adopted him, but we did not limit him on his time,
Sure.
With his dad he spent a lot of time with his great grandmother who raised his dad and kind of raised him, and so we didn't take away time with his biological family too, but then it's kind of funny during the Christmas break that, because they're 5 and 6, so they don't really understand. They don't know the story of the older kids and none of this or their own story yet, but they're asking why one of them wasn't over or where they were, why they weren't at our house at Christmas, and we're kind of they just had things to do, but knowing they're their other biological parents, but you just had to kind of hope they go on to the next question, I guess.
Yeah.
Hold on.
At the time, but
Kids will always ask those questions too. The ones that you really don't have a good answer for in the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My sister and I have different fathers, and I remember as a kid, whenever she would go to visit her dad, I was always like, "Why can't I go? David seems like a cool guy. Why can't he also be my dad? Why can't I have two?" I'm sure that drove my parents crazy of how do we handle that situation.
Yeah, I understand.
So you talked about seeing a lot of grandparents in the juvenile court system that are having to raise their children. You do see that more and more frequently. And there's the adage that you hear all the time is you have to raise your kids right or you'll end up raising your grandchildren for them. I think, what do you think we can do as a community? Because we can't make somebody be good parents. But as a supportive community within the church, with the area, what do you think we can do to kind of help prevent that from happening, that grandparents aren't having to raise their grandchildren?
Yeah.
I want to ask you easy questions.
No, I'm sure it's a question that's been around a long time, I don't know. I guess I look at it as more being there as a church for the kids themselves. I know it's the parents that are going through the difficulties in life, and whether they were saved at one point and wandering away from Christ or what, I don't know, but I don't know. I think more or less we just need to be there for the children. And hopefully getting those kids in church, it helps get their parents in church, or helps them to see where they need to be in life with their kids, and getting their life straight.
Yeah.
To keep from losing custody of their kids, or whatever their situation is. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of different situations. I think that I hate the thought of tearing a family apart, but I do think that there are situations where the children are better off.
Yeah, you gotta do what's best for the kid.
For the kid above all.
Yeah.
In that. But I think so. What you're doing, from what I'm hearing, of course, I don't know you outside of the handshake out in the hallway there, but it sounds to me like just in the fact that you're selflessly raising these children that come from that bad situation. You do have them in a godly home. And so from that, not only are you helping to upbring them in the way they should be, but you're able to kind of scatter that light out to the people that are directly involved in with the dad. And I would pray that through seeing you, how you behave, how the children are being raised, that would be kind of a visual testimony, if not just a verbal testimony for that.
No, I agree. Yeah. And there's been. I was trying to think where we were the other day. Some people told us or talked about how well our kids are, and just like yesterday, we were at the mall at Westtown, and we took a break, and I let the wife go on and do some shopping on her own, and I was sitting there on this little playground with the kids. It's just notice how well our kids play with other kids, and that's just like you said, it's a testimony of how you brought them up and how you talked to them, and it was kind of funny, early on getting these kids. The only kids they were really around was our 20-year-old kids early on. And so we'd take them to the parks and playgrounds, and our little ones just stand to the side and watch these other kids play, because we didn't really have any kids in the neighborhood. Most of the kids were all our older kids' ages, and it was just kind of funny. They didn't know how to take it at first, because my wife took off work. She wasn't working, so they weren't preschool at the time, weren't no nursery or daycare. Besides the time at church and church nursery, that was it.
Yeah. I've kind of seen a little bit of that in Emmy, because my wife doesn't work. She stays at home and takes care of the girls as well. And they do get to see kids. Of course, they see their cousins that are around their age, but the majority of the kids they see, where she's 2, they're 8 or 9. And so she kind of adopts their mentality, their personality, and gets to go there. So now it's not just, hey, come play with this. It's like, hey, I'm going to take your hand up. Get up. We're going in here now to play with that. So how old are you?
I'm 50.
Okay, so I don't think men care that much about how old you are for that. So you basically started completely from scratch back at 45.
Oh, yeah.
Had to do this thing again.
44, yeah.
Was there ever a moment of regret of I was almost out, I was almost able to live that pre-retirement relaxation?
I mean, we joke about it, yeah, but like I said, neither one of us had the hesitation of taking them in. My wife has made comments, and she goes, I don't know. She goes, I used to raise all 3, or 3 older ones. She goes, I used to keep up with the 3 of them, no problems. And sit there and tell her, I said, yeah, but we're 25, 30 years younger too. But it's just, no, I mean, they're truly a blessing, and the Lord knew what He was doing, putting them in our lives, and I don't know, it's kind of like He gave us that structure that we needed, because there's no telling where our lives would have went with the freedom and trying to fill our time up, and
pinned you back down in a good way.
Yeah.
So you talked about when you were younger, you believed you had your salvation at 10, I think you said. So what was the moment that kind of clicked in your adult life where you said, I had this wrong, I've been living wrong this whole time?
I guess just dealing with everything that's going on in my life, and just, I don't know, the loneliness. Here I'm halfway around the world, and you're wanting to try to fix the problems that you're dealing with, or you're trying to deal with on your own, and you can't deal with them on your own without being right with the Lord. And I was working night shift, and I remember just crying and asking that afternoon, just still afternoon, I worked 12 to 12 on the flight line, and before I went to bed that day, I just said, I got to get right with the Lord. And I ended up calling a former pastor. It was still my church, my membership, but I hadn't went in a year or so. We just got out of church and got away, and then he prayed with me, and help lead me to Christ. And then I just remember the next couple of days just reaching out to everybody I knew, letting them know my decision and everything else. And
Yeah.
then just getting back home and working back on the marriage, trying to get our marriage centered around church. And we ended up going to another church, and we're still members there, once we got back. And we kind of strayed during the COVID thing, just trying to keep our kids safe. And because it seemed there for a while, every other Sunday where kids come from church nursery with a cold or
Yeah.
something like that. And I was like, well, we did a lot of, online and stuff like that with church. And
A lot of people kind of
during
took
the COVID stuff.
time.
But, I guess, my growing up, I guess, I heard a thing on Twitter the other day from Billy Graham talking about one of his crusades. It's a video from his crusade, and he referenced right before he went to this crusade or this speech, he's talking about a guy in Asheville that robbed a bank and, telling the teller to put the money in the bag and not realizing she put a dye pack in there. Well, whenever he left, the thing exploded, and here he's got dye on his hands and stuff, and he can't get it off, And he made reference, that's how our souls are, that we're stained. And God knows, and He sees it, and, and kind of tying this story in, I know I'm stained from many years of my life, but kind of the sermon at church today, the guy made reference, through what Christ did for us on the cross, God doesn't see us as that stained soul. He sees us, as the righteousness of the Lord. And
Thank God for it.
yes, very much. Yeah. But, it's just kind of funny how they tied together, but, it's just, you don't think of that, There's a lot of people that are going to judgment with those stains, and they're going to be showing because they didn't, accept Christ as their Savior and for what He did for us.
I think that message is really overlooked. I've heard it, of course, plenty of times, and I've said it myself, but the thought that God no longer sees us as that person.
As we truly are, yeah.
That
have been.
That he sees us as washed in the blood. And I think we overlook how powerful it really is, how freeing that is.
It's a very strong statement. And
yeah, I don't
when
know
you sit and think about it,
yeah.
It's just,
I have a bad tendency, I don't know about you, I know me and Philip talked about this, is I can one day say, I am forgiven, I'm now a saint, a child of God, and, I'm moving forward from this, but then the very next day I look back.
Yeah,
I think that's not who I am. I'm still this guy.
Yeah, and it's along the same lines of we shouldn't judge, but you try to be the right Christian, not judge people. You see them. Somebody always told me you gotta love the sinner and hate the sin.
Mm-hmm.
But but we as humans, we're always going to judge, or we're going to have that in the back of our mind of. I know what this person like. More or less, we should look at our own lives that way too, And
yeah.
Because, we all see it every day.
It's that fine line of looking at your sin head on, but not getting caught up in your sin.
Yeah.
Because I don't think God wants us to wallow.
Or focus on that.
Yeah. Because I think at that point when we have ourselves so focused on that sin, then we become ineffective. Because we don't see the power of God in us, we just see our flesh and our sin. And I think, like you said, we do that to other people, is we want to look at them and we want to build ourselves up by kind of looking down on that person, whether we consciously mean to or not. We fall into that very quickly, in that judgment.
It's the human side of it, and we're all guilty of it. You'd like to think, I don't want to be that way again, but
You will be.
You will be, yeah, and that's part of it.
Except that's a bottle of water, not a cup of coffee.
Not your coffee.
Yeah. So Todd a little bit better than the next guy. So what? I guess this is going to be kind of a weird question. What was it? Because I've seen your checklist of invite this person, not invite this person. Was there one thing specifically about Todd that made you say, well, I want to get his story out here, or was it just the spirit, the boldness? What was it?
So Todd is not like me. I mean, I know that he's a child of God, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, he doesn't, I go around, like, actively, like talking about, Christian type things. You know what I'm saying?
He's very open. And
yeah, I'm really open and kind of pushy, I guess.
I've
kind
noticed.
of 80 grit, Well, Todd's not that way, but that doesn't mean, I think a lot of times the real reason that I wanted Todd to come is that I think sometimes that people like Todd get overlooked at what a message that their life is given out, because they're not this bold, upfront, pushy, kind of, what's the old saying, beat you with a Bible type personality as a child of God.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ wasn't that way. I mean, he was at times when he was confronted or whatever, he would literally take the word from his mouth. He was the word. And he would take the word from the past that was wrote about him and just tear people to pieces with it, especially like the Pharisees and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, for just people in general that he was around, he was very calm and kind and just, living life with them. And that's what strikes me about you, is that, you're just this calm, even paced, not pushy type person, just, and then when you start talking to him and you hear about these adoptions and you hear about, and then he'll probably tell him a little bit, but this bout that he had with COVID and how they got through that.
Hold up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do know about you.
Yeah,
last
he prayed
August.
for you.
Okay, yeah.
Good, yeah.
So,
And during this whole COVID ordeal, me and Phil got a lot closer just through text while I was at the hospital. And
so Philip, he mentions so many names, and I'm always like, I can't put a face to it. This guy, what have you. So yeah, wow, I do know a lot about you, and I've prayed for you quite a bit.
I appreciate it.
So before we get into that real quick, I can say what you're describing is humility. Is you have the potential in just the story that I know and what you're telling about your children, of you could almost brag about the blessings God's given you.
Oh yeah.
But you are extremely calm, humble about that, and that's a very very rare fruit of the Spirit to see, kind of as a personality trait. We talk about with the group that we have, we've had so many people on this podcast that have so many different personality traits, and I think God takes what's naturally in somebody, and once the conversion, he kind of magnifies that and is able to use that. And so with some people that have more of the bold personality, well, he'll put in this role over here, and with you may not be in that role, but you still have that role that you do have, whatever that may be. And I think the pastor said it this morning. He was talking about everybody fulfilling their roles, whatever that role is, even if it's just shaking hands at the door.
Agreed.
And that made me think of Stephen. So Stephen's role was to kind of just be filling in the gaps, taking care of the people that were being overlooked. But his role was important enough to be deemed a martyr. And so that's not that I want you to be martyred, but to kind of show people out there that there's a place for everybody in everything that they do. Let's talk about this. So we had been getting Philip had been talking about this fella at work that had gotten, bad on COVID. And can't remember if it was had your wife been vaccinated? You hadn't, or you had been vaccinated?
She had been vaccinated.
Yeah.
She works in the healthcare business. But,
yeah.
I was adamant since day one of not getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
We had one son that got it early on. The 30-year-old living at home, he had it, and this was early on. He lost his taste and smell. That was it. No side effects, and as things have gotten worse with the different variants, and I think I just come off almost 2 months of night shift, and that last week of night shift, I worked with another coworker, and his wife had got it, but he first tested negative, and I didn't work with him past Tuesday morning. Well, by Thursday morning into Friday morning, he had texted me Friday afternoon saying, "Hey, I'm positive now." And, I just thought, well, hopefully I don't get it,
Yeah, hopefully you got it.
But
point.
then that weekend, come Sunday, I started, it felt like the flu was coming on. And so I come in, I was off the next week on vacation, but I come in that Monday morning just to get a COVID test. And because I had my brother and my niece's birthday party come up, and I knew I was going to be around my parents, and I didn't want to be around them if I was. And sure enough, that Monday I was positive.
Perks of working for the government, right?
Yeah. But so I got that, and I stayed away from the birthday party and all that, and fought it all week, and just never really got better. Then my wife is, I don't know, it's just like the flu that you couldn't take the right medicines to get the headaches to go away or none of that, the body aches. But then I had a real bad cough, and then it hit me. She's just like, well, we'll just go to a walk-in clinic on a Saturday to get a chest x-ray, and sure enough, he came back with double pneumonia. So we started fighting it, and they give it the antibiotic and the steroid shot, and told me to watch the oxygen. And sure enough, Tuesday I tried to go to the hospital, and by the time I get to the emergency room and get there, my oxygen stays above 90. They won't admit me.
Sure.
So I signed up for the antibodies injection, that they do, infusion. But you can't do it there at the hospital. You have to be an outpatient. But anyway, so I go back waiting, hoping they'll call me that Wednesday. But by Wednesday, by 11 a.m., I had to go back because my oxygen's like 85. I couldn't get it back up above 90. And within 30 minutes, they had me admitted in a room. And luckily, during that whole, I was in the room for 1 or 2 days, and then they sent me to ICU and to get me on more oxygen. And luckily, I never went to the ventilator. It started responding with just straight oxygen. But so I was in ICU for 9 days, and then another 3 days in a regular room. And so I think I was there 13 days total, almost 2 weeks. But my worst fear, and with the wife, is I just did not want to get on a ventilator. At that point, it's like your body quits trying to recover.
How close were you to actually being on a ventilator?
The first 2 days in ICU, it was pretty scary. I mean, just through listening to the nurses and the doctors, with the numbers and stuff, and some of it's kind of a vague memory, not knowing what your oxygen intake and all that is. But they had put me on pretty strong oxygen levels to keep me off a ventilator. But then we slowly day to day started dropping that amount, and the body was still keeping up. So, but yeah, like I said, I got real close to Phil just through text, and he texts about every day, telling me, we're praying for you and trying to get updates. I give him my wife's Facebook or her name through Facebook, and so he's able to keep up with updates through her and stuff like that. But
we had several group messages that were going on, just various things, and it seemed like every day there was some update of how you're doing, where you're at, and if there was a decline or if you were coming back from it.
Yeah, so
you didn't realize it's the same person.
I'd never know.
Yeah.
So by the time I get back home from the hospital, I'm 3 weeks into it, and still had another 3 weeks at home before I got back to the work side of it, and it's long, and I still have trouble to this day with my pulse. A resting pulse is 60 something, but as soon as I get up and walk around, or if I do anything active with the kids, I'm in the 90s or 100, and hopefully that will fix itself over the time. But
just take a little time to recover.
Yeah, but
so what was kind of you said that you were vaccine apprehensive before?
Yeah, I don't know, just my rebellion against it, or I don't know.
Well, I didn't know if you had, because everybody's got some reason for either wanting.
Yeah, and I still have gripes. You hear these people. It does help. It gives you the antibodies, and it helps you. It's proof of how little it affected my wife. Because she got it from me, and I think she had a little bit of congestion and a cough, and she did lose her taste and smell. I never did, but she did lose her taste and smell for about 2 weeks.
So the two lightest symptoms you could have had, you had to stick with that.
I went full blown. And I think, like I said, coming off 2 months and nights, I don't sleep good on night shift, and I think my immune system was down. And the think that's why I got it even worse. But and like I said, I know the vaccine does work. It limits the side effects, and does it completely work? No, and we all know that too.
Yeah.
But dealing with our jobs, and I don't know if I really agree with the mandate. I mean, it does help limit stuff, but then also you hear these people reading through the news, Twitter, stuff like that, say, hey, we don't want to be around people that aren't vaccinated. And I'm sitting there thinking, you vaccinated people can carry and give it to as many as the unvaccinated.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, and my wife, she's probably fussing at me right now under her breath if she's still listening, but it's just, I don't know.
I feel the same way on that. It's not that I'm for or against. It's I don't like the forcible idea.
Yeah, but I do agree. Like my case, I tied up a hospital bed for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And if I'd got the vaccine, that wouldn't have happened. Hindsight's 20/20, I guess. But
Sure.
Which I got it as soon as I could. I thought I was gonna have to wait. Once I got back to work, but they've dropped that waiting period in between having COVID and getting your vaccine. So, and part of that was to keep my job too.
Yeah.
I was about to say you
that
didn't have a
mandate.
choice
But,
at that point. Yeah.
and I don't know. I mean, what's right? What's the best decision here?
I think that's a personal choice for everybody.
Yeah.
So, having gone through that, I got it right at the beginning. I think taste, smell, headache for a day. That's as far as I got with it.
Okay.
And we had several people that kind of had this or that. My brother-in-law never showed the first sign, and we think he's the one that kind of spread it to everybody. And he never showed the first thing on there. So with all the variants that have come out, from Delta was big for a while. Now we've got Omicron coming out. Has you kind of gun shy now, or are you just whatever happens?
No, I mean, I think I still do the antibody testing through work, and my antibodies are still out the roof. So I guess that gives you some assurance, but no, I mean, life's going to throw at you what it will. I mean, you can't. I don't know. I guess you could take precautions and stuff like that, but
You're not.
I'm not scared of it. No, I mean,
As I was going to say, after having the experience that you had, people have the one of two ways: of they made it through, bring on the next thing, or they barely scraped by, let's go hide in the closet, kind of thing.
No.
And with you being here, I don't think you're that one.
No. I don't know. Like I said, we talked with some friends this weekend. I think a lot of us had it within the first 6 months and probably don't realize it.
Yeah.
I don't see how we didn't catch it from our son. I mean, he isolated himself in the house, but you're still around him. You're passing or whatever, and it's in the air. But but I think just the variants have gotten worse, and I don't know about this new Omicron, but
From
I
what
know
I've
the Delta
heard
was pretty bad.
From what I've heard of the Omicron, it is much more contagious, but the effects are diminished. Which almost sounds like it'd be the prime of, like, if you want to get something, get that one, since it's not going to affect you as much. But of course, no one wants to get sick
You
of
don't
any
want to
kind.
get it at all. Yeah.
And as soon as I say that, that'll be the worst one for you to get.
Yeah, actually had a guy. I didn't work directly with him, but he's retired from our guard base, and he just passed away from about 2 weeks ago. Patterson knows him too. And it's in the obituary. My wife fussed him about this, but his family put in the obituary. Here he is, got both vaccines and got the booster, and here he's passing away from it. But and when it's your time, it's your time. I mean,
There's nothing you can do to stop it.
no, it's already predestined. And I had a nephew who used to give me a hard time. I brought it up at work when Scott brought up our boss asked us at work one day, what's some things about you nobody knows about? One of mine was, I don't wear a seatbelt. And to this day, I still don't. But my nephew used to give me a hard time about that. And I'm like, if it's my time, it's my time. I'm going. But I guess, but I make all my kids wear a seatbelt. And my son was fussing about it today, too, about me not having it on.
Yeah.
But because he's kind of seen me in my new car. If I don't put it on, the car won't be quiet,
Yeah.
But when I'm driving one of my older vehicles, I just don't put it on. But you know, it's kind of that thing, you know. He always said, you know, he would go back to my sister-in-law and he said, Todd says when it's his time, it's his time. Because he won't wear a seatbelt.
It's good that you've got that peace about that, because I can only imagine being hospitalized for as long as you were under those conditions. The thought of, I may die from this, had to have crossed your mind.
Oh, yeah. My wife would tell you, you know, when I was going ICU, you know, I about full-blown cried in front of her because all I could think about was, you know, wanting to see my kids.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't see them at that time.
Yeah.
My wife was the only visitor, and that was it. Being on the COVID floor, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the scary part of it.
I think if you're going to have an emotional response, that's the best one you can have for the right reasons. Because that's not saying, you know, I'm afraid of dying. It's I have someone out there that I want to see again. I want to be with my children. I want to be able to experience them again. That again is a good testimony to speak to the validity of your salvation, in that you are more concerned with someone else as opposed to your position, your standing where you were.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of death around us here lately.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's my mom, you know, she's 94, and she's like, you know, there's nobody that I like know for years, you know, grew up around, all of my family, all of, you know, my husband, everybody's gone, you know, there's nobody really from her generation, you know, that she's around anymore. They've all passed on. And what I was going to say is, the longer you live, the more death you endure.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're seeing death time and time and time again, the older you get. And not that it gets any easier, it's just it becomes something that you either look at as, you know, oh no, you know, here's another one or whatever, or it should fire us up as children of God to say that, you know, a lot of people look at, you know, we talk about this all the time on here, a lot of people look at, well, I read in the book of Revelation, you know, to look for this and this and this, and this is the end of time coming. Well, you know, when's your last breath?
When's your
do you know when your last breath is? Because I don't know when mine is. And
shouldn't be worried about the end of time.
Yeah, let's worry about that we may be taking our last breath, and are we, like you said, are we right with God? Are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we focus on all kind of different things instead of our relationship with God. And if we get our relationship with God right, like you're talking about, He's focused. You don't have that worry. You don't have that concern. And so Todd wasn't worried about that. He was worried about, you know, raising his children, his family, his wife, what all that was going to occur. It wasn't, you know, I need to get right with God. I got that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is God going to allow me to go back to my family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, we do say that a lot. Everybody's always worried about that whatever the History Channel's saying is going to be Armageddon.
Yeah.
And what they got to realize is that whether or not you live for that moment, you are going to pass at some point. So your end of days is coming. And, you know, like you had, 3 days before you were, you know, in the full-blown midst of, am I going to be on a ventilator or not?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't have time to sit there and, you know, gather the family around and tell all these things and get your affairs in order, because it comes so quickly. And, you know, when I was in high school working at Wendy's, I pulled into work one day to start my night shift to get ready to close, and a man had a heart attack in the parking lot, had just had lunch, finished the lunch, and started his car, put it in park, and there he went. You don't know.
You never know.
But it is important to be prepared, and then, like you said, as the believers, that should encourage us to let everybody know, hey, you have to be prepared. You have to get ready for this, because you don't know. You know, David, his brother, just passed just a few days ago, and we had been praying for him for as long as I had been at this church, if not longer, for his salvation. And, you know, he came to the Lord in October. He waited that whole time to come right there, and he passed just a few days ago. So he had 2 months of that salvation life experience, and thank God he has that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was that late, at least he had it for that moment. But what if he had gone in September?
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to hold on. I don't think we need to wait. And you see a lot of people, like the young woman with the rehab thing. There's always something in someone's mind of, well, next year, or just after this, just I've got to do this and then I can do this. Or even with church, let me fix this and then I'll start coming to church. Backwards thinking. Come to church to get that fixed. But let's start on this now, because you may not have that tomorrow. Especially if you're living a life of drug abuse, you may not have 5 minutes from now at the rate things go.
Yeah.
Like Todd was saying, there's things in his life that he couldn't fix.
Yeah.
And so, God may bring you to that point, and you're at a point where, there ain't no other way out of this. If I want something better for me and my life and my family and everything, then he's going to bring you to that point to show himself.
Mm-hmm.
And when he does, then you got a decision to make. Do you want to continue to try to do this on your own, or do you want God's help?
Yeah.
And then, like he's saying, where you had some knowledge of God, you knew that was the place to go. And I fear people, we're not doing a good enough job of at least getting that message out there. And it may be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or it may be 2 months or 2 days, you don't know. But that they remember that. And they say, that I think I remember somebody telling me there's hope out there somewhere. There's something else. There's something outside of this lifestyle that I'm living, and they can go searching for that. But I think there's a lot of times that we don't speak when we should, and there's people that it's hard to imagine that people in America really don't know who God is or who Christ is or what that's all about. But there really is. There's really a lot of people that have really no good idea of who Christ is. It's
I love them. They just don't have a personal relationship.
Yeah.
There's only one way to do that.
Yeah. Well, the enemy is a lot better at broadcasting his agenda than we are.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've heard the name of Christ, you've heard it in a negative way. Unless you've grown up in a church setting. You hear about these things, and the History Channel will put on all these pseudo-documentaries about these lost books that are supposed to be the truth. Oh, well, the Gospel of Judas wasn't included because it tells about the real Christ. No, it's also just a book someone wrote. But people will hold on to that one nugget. Or they'll hear about, well, this one church did this to me. Or this, and they have this negative perception of Christ, and they don't realize that he's not a wrathful, judgmental, sending everybody to hell because of what they're doing God. He's a loving, caring God that doesn't want anybody to go to hell. He wants to pull them from that. And they don't hear that enough. But that is very, for you to have heard enough to know that when that moment come, whenever you were beaten down to that no hope kind of point, that you had that information, that you had what you needed to be able to turn to him. Praise God that you heard that from somewhere, from somebody at some point.
Definitely blessed, thank goodness for his grace and mercy, because I don't deserve any of these blessings, to be honest. As sinners, we really don't, like going back to the way, once you accept Christ, the way he looks at you, he's not seeing you as you deserve to be looked at, But
if we got what we deserved, we'd be in a sorry state.
Oh, yeah.
Paul says that if there's nothing after this life, we're considered men most miserable. I think if there is something in this life and we get what we are owed, then we are men most miserable. But thank God that he saw past that, and he's able to pull us from that. So what is the future looking like for you with what you've got going on? Are you involved in the I guess leadership of the church, or are you just
No, we need I wish we were more, but right now, we're not involved ourselves enough. We're more concerned about raising these kids in a
Sure.
God-fearing family. And, you know, we should be more involved ourselves, just as that would be a witness too. But
Well, that's not to
you
say
know,
that
and-
you have to be involved in like a titled position.
no, I understand that, and you know, we try to, you know, do what's right with these kids, and you know, we're scared, you know, being drug exposed babies. You know, there's always a tendency, and when they get older, you know, we worry they could easily get involved that again. You know, when they're older, and that's our biggest concern, is trying to raise them and keep them in around people that are not in that life. You know, and
Yeah.
we want to keep them in church, and they're excited. You know, and
So that
you know, even during this COVID pandemic, you know, they've come to us asking to go to church. You know,
awesome.
and that's a good thing. You know, and it's just, I just want to keep them in a God fearing and life, and raise them, hopefully to bring them to Christ. You know,
Yeah.
at some point, once
So
they're
you have considered the, you said that with them coming from a drug background, that there is that potential to kind of go back into that life later on. I've talked about this a few times on here. I think there's the two competing theories of, is it nature or nurture as far as your addictive personality. And some people will say, well, it's in your nature. It's a genetic thing. It is passed down, and you know, if you have a predisposition, so to speak, towards addiction of some kind. Then there's the other school. If it's nurture and it's the environment that you're around. And I've seen both cases kind of work out. I don't think there is a definitive answer for that. I can say within myself that out of all the drinkers in my family, only two of us have ever shared like a direct bloodline. The rest of it was stepfather, adoptive kind of situations. But it all did kind of come from that in a nurturing situation. But then I've known people that have been, you know, on the complete opposite spectrum kind of go through that. But I think the majority of it does stem from what are they seeing, what are they exposed to, and what kind of life do they see from their role models.
Yeah, no, I think nurturing's a big part of that. That's where we both talked. You know, we want to be in the right. You know, we want to give them every chance possible to stay away from that. You know, life, or you know, you don't. You know, like you said, you don't. I don't understand. You know, hey, you know, they're exposed to drugs 9 months into womb, but how can they be part of their nature? But you hear it, and you hear people talk about it, and you hope you can nurture them enough to keep them away from that.
Dean, a good friend of ours, he's another pastor. He wrote a comment on there, said that's why we must be born again. If we're born into this world with these predispositions, if we're born again in Christ, we believe we're truly new. That's washed away.
Yes.
And that goes for everything. You know, people always say, well, I was born this way. Well, I was born alcoholic. I was born with whatever the sin is they've got. God made me this way. Well, He made you a person. Your sinful nature turned that way. But you can be born again. So if you were born that way, well, you can be born better.
Yes.
You can be born and changed into who that is. So appreciate that, Dean. Joe, we've seen you on there, mentioned it a few times. I'm just always pass the conversation before you hop on there. But we definitely appreciate the comments on that. What verse do you pop up there?
Luke 9:23.
Right there, there you go.
Yeah, Joe had said, don't look down on them, lead them to God, and show them His words. And he says, when the Spirit of God spoke to me, I could not refuse Him.
So Luke 9:23 that Dean just quoted on there, he said to them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. And that eliminates any excuse that we have of, you know, really any excuse we have at all. Whether you want to say, well, my dad did this, and it's a family tradition for it. You know, Hank Williams said that, Junior said that pretty well. I tried to get my wife to name our son Hank, just to carry that on, but she wouldn't go for it. But I think that we as people want to grasp onto any excuse we have for our behavior except for owning up to it ourselves. And it would be very easy for, you know, in any situation, your situation, to fall into a negative lifestyle and blame it on circumstances. And if, you know, if you wanted to, you could tear the world apart because you were better bedridden for COVID, and you could say that, well, God didn't love you because you got sick, and God had abandoned you because you had went through this. And people do that. We see that all the time.
I understand.
And so it's disheartening, and I don't know the good answer for that. I don't know what we as the body are to do in those circumstances other than try and tell them and show them that that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the fleshly nature to come up with an excuse so that we're not at fault for what's wrong with us.
I understand.
But again, that's part of that taking up that cross. And I still do that. I fall into the trap myself very quickly of, if I've got something wrong, well, I'll say, well, I'm only human. That works until you're a believer, and then you've got this elevated status now. Well, now you're a child of God. You're not just a man anymore. You're still in man flesh, but you are His child. And if you're His child, if you've been adopted, then you're joint heirs and joint heirs with Christ. And it goes on. And
you have the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So you don't have any excuse. Yeah, we make excuses and we use excuses, but we don't have one.
Yeah.
Because once you're a child of God, you have the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit will lead, guide, and direct you. It's just being obedient to that Holy Spirit. And that's where we fail, is that obedience.
I like what the brother said this morning in Sunday school. He said, right before you do something, you'll get that little voice that tells you what you're doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's the Holy Spirit. I don't even think he said that was the Holy Spirit. He just said that's that little peak of conscience, what it is. But we still pursue. We still fall short. But glory to God, He doesn't see that either. Once we repent of that, He washes that away, and it's like a clean slate every day. I think part of taking up the cross is getting that clean slate.
Absolutely.
For yourself and for Him. Yeah. And that's what the cross has always been. At no point outside of modern decoration has the cross meant anything other than death. That's when Christ talked about taking up His cross to the multitude. He was saying you have to die.
Daily.
Spiritually, physically, some way you're going to have to die. When Paul talks about that, it is death. The cross does symbolize death, but it is through the resurrection that we get the life from that. So I don't think, at least for me, I often neglect the daily death. I'll get up, I'll pray, I'll have my conversation with God, but I still want to hold on to how I was, what I've been doing. Even if it was something yesterday, I want to hold on to that. And that's kind of what I dig on. It's very difficult for me to get over that and to die to that, to fully turn that repentant over.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we say we let life get in the way, but I think we just use life as an excuse,
It's easier.
Yeah.
Sadly, it is. So what are your children, how are they as far as, you said they want to go to church, they want to be a part of that. Do they have like particular stories they like to read about? Do they just like the singing? What is it about church that really drives them to want to participate?
I think it's more the fellowship of the children's church. And,
yeah. Because kids are all different when it comes to church. Some kids can't stand it, and they want to sleep and do whatever. But for them to actually want to go,
but no, they're both into the music and singing and dancing, so to say. But no, it's just, I think it's more just the fellowship. They just want to be around other people too, and they just enjoy that environment too.
That's great.
They know they're there for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, Jesus is in their heart, and when time will come when He's really in their heart. But I think they just like being around the church.
Yeah,
that's still my reason. I like the fellowship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's when COVID first hit and the mandate was all churches couldn't meet. We still showed up, just me and Philip, and I would still do my best to give a sermon to the camera, which is awful. Won't do it again. We'll do something. We'll do something else next time if that happens again. But I did notice there was, even in myself, the spirit had kind of died down.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult, and this is kind of one of the biggest arguments against the people that say, well, I don't have to go to church to be saved. Well, you don't, but To be effective, I think you absolutely do, because you have to feed off one another. You have to kind of, I don't want to say siphon the spirit, but you get that from meeting, from the fellowship, from the brotherhood. And I don't think you can do that from home. I can't watch I can't even watch a live service. That does nothing for me, and there's too many potential distractions. If I'm not there, I'm not experiencing that. So
Yeah,
I don't
understand.
know how people were able to do video church. I don't know how people are still doing
That's
video
hard.
church.
And like I said, unless you put yourself in a place to where you don't have the distractions, you can't. And it's kind of, people always told me, I used to read a lot. So I'd carry 4 or 5 books with me whenever I'd go on trips. I used to work for Siemens Medical, and I'd be gone 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But people are like, why don't you do audiobooks? But I can't do an audiobook the same way, because I'm sitting here looking or seeing what's going on around me, and I'm not even listening to an audiobook. But kind of our sermon today was he's talking in Matthew 5 about Christ teaching the disciples, and he makes a comment about your righteousness has to be more than righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. And it's kind of like that point of then in Matthew 20, he's talking, basically the scribe, do as I say, not as I do, is what he's referring to them, because, they're kind of put up a face,
Yeah.
And, he started talking about that and how we get in a rut with church. We put our face on once we get there, and then once you leave the church, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Until next Sunday or next time you walk through the doors, And a comment come up, he asked, how many fights or arguments are on the way to church, and as soon as you open that door, you got this grin on your face. And I teased my wife at the church, because, when we left, we kind of live out in the country, and there's a guy that rides his horse, and sure enough, he's riding down the road this morning as we're going to church. So I'm in the far left lane to go around him, and he turns to look, and he's steering the horse towards another road. And I threw my hands up at him, but it's just, it's just one of those moments. You're like, you should be. I guess we get involved with the world.
We do.
We let it take over when it shouldn't certain times. And
You can't judge somebody's character from how they are Sunday. You have to go Monday through Saturday to see who they really are. Because whether we want to or not, we do put on that mask Sunday, and when we're in the church, that is our caricature of like the prime person we can be.
Yeah.
How are we Monday morning at work? What do we do throughout that? And we pray and we strive towards being the same uniform throughout. But I'll never look at somebody at church on Sunday and say that's exactly how that person is, unless I see them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what have you. Like Philip's prime example. The only difference between Philip on Sunday and Philip throughout the rest of the week is throughout the rest of the week, if I'm seeing him, it's usually in a garage somewhere, and he's usually not reading from the Bible. He's usually just talking about God.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only difference that he has. But it's the exact same tone, appearance, same clothes. He is the same throughout.
we should thrive to be that way.
Yeah.
Everyone.
But that's definitely. I don't know where I was going with that.
Are you saying I'm as agnostic? No. How you say it? I am as. What's the word? Like you can't stand me.
Oh, no. Not saying that.
Here as I am.
Other people might say
I'm
that.
just saying, Phil's Phil, no
Yeah.
matter where he's
Yeah.
at.
And that's it.
And that's a good thing.
We went to another assembly this morning to kind of just fellowship with them and kind of extend the hand of brotherhood out there. And the whole time I was thinking, we've been to some groups and everybody was in a suit, and you kind of felt looked down on if you were in blue jeans. And we've been to others to where if you wore a suit, you'd kind of get that kind of side eye for it. And some over here that are only this, and some over here that are this. And I'm always nervous going into those situations. And I told Pastor Day, I said, I don't know what we was walking into here, but
Yeah.
luckily, God provided the spirit, and everything worked out well. But I always am very concerned in that scenario of I want to be genuine, but I also, in the mindset of Paul, I want to be everything to everybody. I want to be able to relate to how they relate. So I'm always walking that line of how do I do this without
being offensive.
without being offensive, or how do I relate without coming off as disingenuous? And that's something that I struggle with a lot. The majority of this podcast is me telling people my issues, and we try and work through them.
Yeah.
I had another point I was going to bring up, and it's completely left me now. So if you can think of something in the meantime, while I try and draw that thought back out.
Yeah, it's sometimes my dad used to say, must have been a lie. If I try to think of something and I couldn't remember, that's what he'd say. Must have been a lie.
I want to say something involved with the service this morning, but for the life of me, it's
Speaking of that, that was Jonathan's idea, and then he couldn't. He's another pastor that is another church in Rockwood, and that church, Vision, and this church, Sugargrove, we have bonded, and so we do things together. And so he had an idea of spending this morning with another assembly somewhere. Said if we could find one, we'll do that. Well, I said, well, what about Midtown? I said they're new and started with a new pastor, looks like. And I said I don't know any of them. None of us knew anybody, and so we'll just pop in over there and bless them this morning. Well, I mean, they could have thrown us out. We didn't know. But I just felt like my spirit was drawing me, over there. And so we, on what God had led Jonathan to do and the church that God had led me to, we just popped in over there. And the Sunday school teacher taught on a chapter that I had been studying all week. So that was some confirmation. And then just the way that they, was very...
very welcoming, very on point. Yeah, it was really good.
And of course they believe in the word and what it says, and it is what it is, and you gotta just suck it up. He's not gonna baby the word.
No,
so
I always refer to it as watered down.
Yeah, he's not a watered down church.
No,
so we like that too. So
both of them distinctly said, there's a good chance that at some point we'll say something that'll offend you, and you may get up and walk out of there. And if you get up and walk out of there, it's a good sign. That means you're under that much conviction that the Holy Spirit is working on you.
True.
And he really hit me today, because there's been several times that there's been a point to make, and I've given people a way out. And
yes,
yeah. Hey, listen, I've already got myself on that. I don't need you to go on me that too.
Are we going to continue to talk about your problems?
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Blessing and cursing is me. It's just here's what I'm going through, and let's ask our guest about these questions. See if they can help me out. We really do appreciate you being on here, and I remember now. Last month you was going to try and be on here. I guess it'd been November, and then something had come up, and we couldn't get you on there, and we had to kind of reschedule. And like I said, I knew who you were by prayer request and situation. Didn't know name, didn't know face, but glad to put them together.
I appreciate that.
Is there anything that you really just want to get off your chest to tell people, to let people know that if there's one thing that God's told you to share today?
Nothing really. Not that I can think of right offhand. Just, like I said, I guess today's sermon at church, it's just not getting complacent. You get complacent, and there's nothing wrong with the faithfulness of going to church. It's a big part of it too, but I guess you want to be going for the right reasons and not just to be seen or be there.
That is true.
But I guess I want to be more involved, I guess, than just being there.
Well, it seems like you've definitely got the heart for it. I feel that coming from you, that you're obviously, like we talked earlier about the humility of it, about how humble you are, that you're not going to go for something to where you're the focus. But I do also feel like that you are going to be in a whatever is needed, I'll fill the gap as best I can. And I can speak from a pastor's perspective that's probably the most valuable member you can have, because there's a lot of gaps that have to be filled. And if it's not filled by somebody, it's usually filled by the pastor or Sunday school teacher, and then everybody's stretched out and doing what they can do. So that's really encouraging. I'm very pleased in really hearing about the children too. That's encouraging to me to hear you taking that on, you and your wife, in such a selfless and loving way, and to be able to take kids and give them an opportunity. Because without you and without God intervening directly, their life would be significantly worse off.
Oh yeah,
No doubt about it.
I'd hate to think where their life would be,
Let's not think about it then.
No, I mean, and luckily I'm blessed to have the wife I do, to be there with me and be on this journey with me.
I still love the thought of just coming home and, hey, we got a kid now.
I mean, she got that call, and like I said, and I told her, I said, you don't have to call and ask that, and we've had the conversations before, and neither one of us hesitated, and still haven't to this day, Besides maybe getting tired at our ages now, more than what we remember with the first set of kids, But yeah, they're truly blessings, that's for sure.
Yeah, thinking of that mentality of her not having to ask you because you had been in communication with her, y'all had a relationship to where she knew your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that from our relationship with Christ, if we are in a relationship like you and your wife was in at that time, and she knew your heart, and she knew that she didn't have to ask you, she knew it was going to be okay. And a lot of people's like, well, I didn't know or whatnot. Well, if you're in His Word and you have a relationship with God and you know His heart and you know things, you know what God's heart is, then you don't have to ask Him every step and everything that you do. You know His heart. You know when you're doing right, when you're doing wrong, when this is something that is a godly thing or an ungodly thing. We don't have to play dumb.
Yeah.
If we have a true relationship with God, then we already know in our heart.
Well, with Christ being our role model, how many times do you see Him actually going to the Father and asking, is this what I need to do, or can I do this? Very rarely, outside of really the Garden of Gethsemane.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when He calmed the sea, He didn't say, Father, will you stop this? It was just, hey, stop.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is what needs to be done. He's very direct in that. And the same relationship we have with our spouses is the same relationship we have with God, even more so.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to get to that level where we have that kind of communication. And so, with your wife and, with anybody's spouse, you know them. You spend time with them. Before you marry them, you get to know them. You have the courting, dating, whatever generational thing you want to call it. I think it's just talking to people now is what they call it. You have to get that level with God. Because if you don't, if you just say, oh, I'm a believer, but you don't have that relationship, then you don't have communication, and you're not hearing Him when He talks to you, and He's not hearing you, because there's still that barrier there.
Mm-hmm.
But if your relationship with God's anything like your relationship with your wife, I think you're on the right track. I think you're doing really good there. Somebody's up there playing basketball. Philip, you got anything else closing?
I don't.
Folks, we do appreciate you. Todd, we appreciate you being here, brother.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to be able to put the face to the prayer request that we had. And it seemed like watching the news, whenever you hear about the case, like somebody stuck down a well, and like everybody in America is focused on this.
Yeah.
That's how we were in your situation, not to make you feel uncomfortable about that, but we were so invested in your life because of really just the testimony that we were feeling from it. Again, I didn't even know who you were walking in here seeing you, but just from how Philip had talked about you and from what we saw from your wife, it was worth praying about. So we're glad to see you come out of that, and we're praying that your pulse gets in order. I guess you can look at it now as exercise is a lot easier because it's all about getting your heart rate up. Well, you can get your heart rate up walking down the hallway.
Pretty much for that, yeah.
So you're good to go for that. Folks, thanks for joining us today. You can always watch us live. We try and do them every Sunday around 4. It's either at 4 or it's at 1 o'clock, and it depends on our guest availability, so you can always look for those two times. If you're on our Facebook, you can get notified anytime that we start to make a post or start to go live. It'll actually give you a warning, so you can click on there immediately with us. We love seeing live interaction. Joe and Dean, we appreciate you on there. You can hop on at any time and send us questions. You can say things on there. Philip is always able to respond at any time. If I've not already moved on, I can comment. I can read whatever you've got for you there. If you have any questions or comments for us, you can join on the group there. You can message us directly on Facebook, or you can send us an email at blessingcursing3019@gmail.com. Other than that, the best way you can help the show out is to leave us ratings and reviews on all the podcast apps. If you're listening to this recorded on YouTube, I think there is a little bell subscription button, and you can give us a like on there. And it's not anything for our egos, but it helps other people find us. The more interactions that we have across all social media, the more that the websites deem this is something worth looking at. So we want to get more people out there so that we can share more amazing testimonies, and we can really just share the experience that God has given to us. So we appreciate all the help on that. I don't think that I've missed anything, Philip, if you can think of anything.
No.
All right, we should be good, folks. God bless you, and thank you.